sacred art of nosy fluting. Once I was walking on a path in this forest, on my way home after a long meditation sit at one of my favorite spots. And on the final stretch of this walk home, I came across a large Cape cobra. And I think because I was barefoot and perhaps quite sensitive and quiet underfoot as a result of having sat for a while, I startled the large snake. And in a flash, it lifted its head and its hood up and just stood there looking at me. It was easily within striking distance, and in that moment I felt myself freeze. My mind went quiet, my body went still, and it felt like time stopped. It was just me and the snake on a path in a forest, staring at one another. In some ways I didn't even feel like I was there. I'd booked out long ago. But I was so quiet and so peaceful. I remember it so vividly. My heart being slow, my mind being quiet, my breath being relatively still. And I just felt my body move to the one side, as if to open, as if to offer an invitation of passing. And I watched this happen. I felt myself moving without the decision to move. It felt very much like this intelligent response to just allow or open up as a signal or the cue for the snake to pass peacefully. And as I was doing this, I watched the snake respond as if in a dance, slowly collapsing its hood and dropping its neck back down to the ground and slowly slithering off. And only once it had passed, I noticed my heart rate speed and my mind start racing with thoughts and scenarios and what-if situations. And then, in the coming days, as I shared the story with others, the mind really started gripping onto the possibility of, what if it bit me in the forest? What would have happened? How would I have responded? Would I have been okay? And the fear started to grow in me. And what was interesting was that this encounter was on a point of the path that I moved on almost every day. And in the days that followed, I noticed that as I got to this encounter point, this fear would just rise up at me and my mind would start spinning. I'd start looking out for the snake everywhere. Sticks and logs would all of a sudden morph into snakes for a second and then disappear back into logs and sticks. If I was quiet in mind or thinking of something, all of a sudden everything would gravitate towards focusing on this threat. This fear was so strong and palpable that it gripped me for those few seconds as I was moving past that encounter point. And of course, part of me knew that I was not going to see a snake. I'd walked that path thousands of times before that encounter with no occurrence, with no such experience. The chances were so low. But yet, the mind in that moment just couldn't help itself. But yet the mind in that moment couldn't help by evoking this possible scenario. And this situation and the difference between the actual encounter and my reaction and response in the days that followed gave me this really clear example of the difference between responding to danger on the one hand and fear on the other hand. Responding to danger, my mind went quiet. My body was hypersensitive and alert. My breath was still. I was very present. There were no memories or thoughts of what could happen. I was just there with the snake. And in a fearful situation, the mind is active, the heart is racing, the breath is unsteady. All these thoughts and possibilities occupying around the central node of me, of David, and is he going to be okay? Is he going to get attacked, or is there going to be another encounter again? And I quickly recognized that if there was actually a dangerous situation, I wouldn't want a fearful response. I wouldn't want a racing mind that's preoccupied with memories of past experiences and future scenarios, and an unsteady breath and a body that can't respond intelligently because attention is so preoccupied with thought. I'd want that quiet mind, that alertness, that sensitivity to the moment that allows me to dance with the danger, with the threat, in a very intimate way. And the lesson for me was really how fear can just take us on these unhealthy loops and occupy the mind and our bodies and our being in ways that just aren't helpful. What was also helpful about this experience is that because I got to walk past this encounter point every day, and I'd been practicing Advaita and non-dual and self-inquiry for a while, it was this beautiful opportunity to really evoke fear quite naturally. Every time I passed the point, fear would arise, and I could watch it and the stories and everything that moved with it. And so this practice emerged where, as I was moving past that encounter point, I would notice the fear arise, this emotional charge in my chest, the thoughts go around me, and was I going to be okay? Was there another snake around that I had to protect myself from? And then just to practice the investigatory inquiry of who is the one who's feeling this fear, who is the one who's thinking these fearful thoughts. And as the mind quietened through that practice, I could then just sit with the residue of this fearful feeling and emotion, and I could just open up to it by being this quiet, open, spacious awareness that allowed the fearful emotions and feelings to rise up and discharge, almost like a kettle that's lid has been lifted and all the steam is let out, which slowly cools the water and brings everything back into harmony and balance. Being that open, wide spaciousness allowed these feelings that were associated with this contracted, tense ego that was scared about the encounter happening again, quieten and discharge. And so for me, it was one of those really potent opportunities to see this practice in place and to see the real liberating effect it can have. After a few days, that emotion had passed, the thoughts had quietened, and I could move along that path with nothing more than a quiet chuckle and a beautiful memory of a sacred encounter with a magnificent animal.